Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Winning Digital Customers Livecast. I am super excited today because I have an awesome guest, Deb Gildersleeve, who's the CIO of QuickBase, and she's going to be talking about some research that they've done around digital transformation in the era of COVID. You know, we've talked on this show a number of times, really almost every week, really, about the accelerating role that COVID has played and the changes that have been necessary for businesses to adapt to a COVID world, and you know, that it's accelerated a lot of the things that we were already doing. But I actually think that that's even a little bit too general, because it's not only accelerated things that we've already been doing, but I think what we've seen is that it has also made some things more important than others that we have to move forward. Clearly, in places like retail, things like order online and pick up in the store, pick up at the curb. And one of the other challenges that COVID has created for our digital transformation is the sense of urgency. And one of the tools that I see a lot of companies using to deal with urgency are these relatively new low-code platforms, ways of getting apps and solutions out to our customers, to our associates and other employees that can be deployed quickly. And even though that's always been important, speed has always been key, man, has it never been more important than when the world changes overnight and you have to figure out how to adapt. So I know that some of the companies that have been able to be the most successful at that rapid adaptation have been those that had the right technologies in place. And certainly low-code platforms are one component of those types of solutions. So that's the world that Deb works in. I want to just start by just asking Deb for you to introduce yourself, share with us about the research that you've done, which is really exciting, and then we'll, I know I have many questions about it.
Sounds great. Thanks, Howard. I am QuickBase's CIO. I am our first CIO, which that is exciting in and of itself. I started the role during COVID, so I'm adjusting to things the same as everybody else is. One of the things I'm excited about in my role is that it's not your typical CIO job. You know, we're in the business of solving problems and not just setting up systems. And while I oversee our own internal systems and our technologies, it's equally important for me to get out there and talk to my peers and talk to other organizations and our clients about that business IT collaboration, which is something that I've championed my entire IT career, but even more now.
Yeah, it's always interesting to be a CIO within a tech company, because very often that's a very different role than a CIO if you're working for Procter & Gamble or something like that. How have you found that that role within the tech world? And is that where you came from, or were you in other types of industries?
I actually spent a long part of my career at Gartner. So so in the tech space, but not on the software side of things. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it is a little bit different. You know, like I said, it is that more client facing, you know, really being out there and educating the IT world on low code, no code platforms and how they can help, you know, so that is definitely something new for me.
Yeah. And for anyone who may not be familiar, can you just give us a quick explanation of what do we mean when we say low code, no code? Is it like Diet Coke or whatever? Are you like, what? All the taste, half the calories, or, you know?
Yeah, right. No, it's a platform where, you know, it's a self-contained platform. You know, people can build applications without really needing to know how to code. You know, if you know how to use a spreadsheet, if you're really good with process, you can work within a low-code, no-code platform to connect systems, to set up a new process, to build out things within a self-contained ecosystem. So, you know, that there's some boundaries around it for those who aren't familiar with coding and some of the things that you need to be looking at.
So, for example, if all of a sudden I needed an app for attestation, so before my employees come to the office, they have to fill out a few quick questions and you know, show a thermometer showing that they've got a reading that's green in their you know, their temperature. That's the kind of app that if you need, you could just build real rapidly and deploy. Is that, if I got the right idea?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and we did see a lot of our clients doing exactly that throughout COVID. Yeah.
And how quickly have you seen apps like that get built? Because I think that's part of what's amazing to people about these types of platforms.
For something like that, if it's a fairly simple application, it's a really important application, but it's not that complicated. You
Right.
need your employees, you need them to give you some data, and you need to, create an outcome. That's something that could be built in a day, in an afternoon, a day or two, like not very long. It doesn't take that long to get something like that stood up, which is a big benefit of the low code, no code world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, your research, such interesting work. Tell us a little bit about what brought it out. Why would a low code, no code company decide to do research into COVID? And have you come up with a vaccine?
Not yet. That we're not really focused there, but we actually started working with Harvard Business Review Analytics Services earlier this year to better understand the challenges and the opportunities of transformation, dealing with digital transformation. That's been out there for such a long time in the IT space. And, really we wanted to dig in, and our first survey that launched in June was focused on the dual track approach to digital transformation. So, not this big bang implementation of big systems, but how you do that along with move other projects forward. And then basically we did a second survey seeing what the impact of COVID has been on digital transformation, and how and why that sort of dual track approach that we were talking about earlier in the year, why is that so important right now?
Yeah. And what did you learn?
We learned a lot. We surveyed over 500 executives, global executives across a number of different industries, to really understand how COVID has impacted digital transformation and the efforts that they had underway. One of the things that became clear, and everybody knows this, COVID fundamentally changed the way the way businesses operate. Our priorities have changed this year. We've got, continuity, resiliency, and agility, becoming key. 91% of the organizations we surveyed completely changed their operating models because of the pandemic. And, 33% of them said that their changes were significant. Which is not really that surprising, to be honest. So, as you change those priorities and you look at much more at business continuity and resiliency, because you send everybody home overnight. There were 33% looking at that pre-pandemic, and we found 53% looking at those, those became a higher priority item post-pandemic. And then obviously agility was another aspect of this. 42% of the companies surveyed, made agility a priority, whereas before the pandemic, only 12% were finding that.
Yeah, interesting. And I think there's another slide that we need to. Is that a different slide?
Might be. I think. Yeah, there's one. There you go.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And did you notice if this was different by industry at all? Did you slice the data that way? I wonder of the ones that found it was most significant. I would hypothesize that, for example, for retailers, it was huge. For law firms, maybe not as significant. Obviously, they had to work from home, but it didn't change as much about how they interact with their clients and such. I'm just curious if you had any data that sliced it by industry.
Yeah, I haven't really dug into the different industries, but what you're saying is correct, right? The retail model completely changed, whereas some of the office related jobs maybe not so much, but you still did take everybody in your office and send them home. So making sure that they had the technology available to them to be able to continue to run your business. Those paper-based processes that might have worked in the office don't work when everybody's sitting at home. So, I think the degrees of change were maybe different within different industries, but I think overall, every industry would have found that those business continuity plans that they put together every year and they dust off, like there were probably some things there that they just hadn't even considered in terms of taking your entire workforce and sending them home, or having them work in a very different way.
Yeah, I would imagine that people will never again think of business continuity planning in the same way. I think those meetings were often poorly attended. It's like, okay, fine. What are we going to, and probably mostly to do with things like natural disasters, right? What do we do in a hurricane?
Exactly.
Much more focused on things like data center, and typically much more focused on very short duration. What happens if the power goes out on our data center for 24 hours, right? And that's a different kind of problem than what if we have to change our operating model overnight?
Right. And usually you look at those as affecting one location, not everywhere, globally.
Yeah.
That's.
In fact, it almost occurs to me that this term business continuity, in a way, is not the right term, because we didn't maintain business continuity. I mean, it depends what you mean, right? But in other words, it wasn't about how do we keep doing what we're doing now, despite the power outage or whatever, but rather how we transform what we're doing. We continue to do business. So in that sense, continuity, but not in the sense of it's the same way. And I think that's the thing that was most different for this.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. We are not doing the exact same things the exact same way anymore. There are different things that sort of factor in now that certainly didn't before. Like building those apps that you talked about. If you're trying to get people back into an office, or even, you were continuing through all of this and having people come into a location, you needed to make sure that you checked on their health and well-being along the way, and that was very different than anything that anybody needed before. That's not the continuity we were talking about, but it is a requirement now.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, my wife collects decorative plates, and I know a lot of people that collect things from figurines to snow globes to cars. I collect stories of when somebody did something right. And I'd love to know, from your vantage point, as you look across, for example, your customers, who is doing it right that really got proved out, either something they did right prior to COVID that once COVID hit, they're like, oh man, I'm so glad we did that because we were ready, or what they did right, when it hit, they took these steps, these actions, and man, that proved out to be the right thing. Because I think some people handle it really well, some companies, and others probably would look back and go, we do that differently.
Yeah. One of our customers that we dealt with through this was Geisinger Health Systems. They're unique that their health system, so they were directly impacted by COVID-19. They had to redeploy 2,000 jobs overnight. So they were able to build a low-code application in about a week. And what the real key thing was, they built it in a week. They were able to train their entire workforce in a day on this new application that allowed them to really, redeploy their resources where they needed to go.
So there's scheduling, assignments, things like that?
Exactly. Yeah.
And was that an app or a web browser-based solution, or what? How was it deployed?
Oh, it's a quick-based app.
An app, yeah.
Yep.
And is that a case where someone can call you up and say, I need to deploy something in a week? How do I get your thing? Or is it more like, no, they could only do it in a week because they'd already set it up and integrated their back ends and everything. So once you've done all that, then, in other words, I'm wondering how much of that was the pre-work that they did to be ready versus the work they did when they had the immediate need.
Yeah, they were already a quick-based customer, so they had some setup already done. I guess it depends on how much those types of applications would need to reach back into your existing systems as to how quickly you could get something up and deployed. Getting QuickBase in and people logging in and building apps is very quick. Just figuring out how you want to structure it within your own ecosystem, that can take a little bit more time. But, for something like this, maybe you just get the app up and running and then you sort of figure out some of the other stuff later, because this was such a different issue than we've encountered before.
Yeah. Is the process, the skill, when I think about the time it normally takes to get a new app deployed at a company, which is usually months, sometimes quarters.
Yeah.
How much of it is about the technology, or how much of it is about their own business process around, I don't know, business requirements, UX design, getting approvals, getting it deployed, all those types of things?
That sort of depends as well. I think in a lot of cases, what you find is where low code can really help is, you've got a business problem that your business folks they're running into this problem every day. They've figured out a way around it, either by, with a spreadsheet process or an email process, or that sort of thing. And, that works for a little while, but that's not scalable. That's, somebody leaves and you don't know that the email's coming to their inbox, or that they had the spreadsheet, or that the system was sitting under their desk, so, this is really, where this can really help is where you've got some of those problems already identified, and you let the people that have the problem and know exactly what the process needs to be, build it out in the tool set, which that's what it's great for. So you've got those business users who have figured out a workaround process, or figured out a process some other way. And this allows them to get it into a system so more people can be part of the process. It becomes a part of the company, and it's not something that can be forgotten. It's within a realm that everybody can access.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So if a company is thinking, we need to be ready to act more quickly the next time, right? And we don't know if next time will be another virus, but we've learned the lesson that we can't predict the types of agility that we might need. And so we need the ability to just respond more quickly, whether it's a situational issue with our company, a massive disruption to our supply chain that might not be an international incident, or whether it's active war, or a major natural disaster, or a pandemic, or the next thing that we never thought would happen. What are the different things that companies need to be doing if they said, I want to be ready the next time when I call up my team and say, I need an app deployed in 36 hours to do X? Is it mostly about technology or other things? What would you advise a company to do to feel like they had that ready capability?
Yeah, I think they probably have some learnings from this situation, so some of those processes that aren't really working that well right now, those are the ones that maybe you address immediately, like assuming they still need to happen. I think that's the other thing is business has changed. Like you probably need to look at some of those processes that you thought were so important, and maybe they are, or maybe they aren't. So, really start with those processes and the ones that worked or could have worked better in this situation. And then again, sort of reimagine the situations. I think everybody's done the business continuity with a certain set of situations. I think that broadens now. So look at that. And then, where you've got some of those situations that getting those systems coded up in some fashion or another would make sense, bringing in a low code platform would be helpful. And the types of things that we advise to make that the most beneficial is set up a center of excellence, make this a business and IT function where they work together. IT can set up some of the guardrails to allow people to, feel good about the fact that they're not going to do something wrong, and allow them to build out the systems that they need, start building out those systems that they need within that center of excellence model. And they work together on some of the issues that they found that they can automate now, or that they can systematize at this point in time. I think that's the best thing for people to do right now. Yeah. And then once you've got that system set up, when that thing comes along that nobody ever imagined, you've got something there that you could use to build what you need.
Yeah. So you're building a capability that you get short-term benefit from because you're applying it to all these perhaps not quite as mission critical projects, but important, valuable, but it also gives you the secondary benefit that now not only do you have the technology in place, you have the people that know how to use it, you've got processes that are designed for rapid development. And then when you need to apply those to an emergency situation, you've got that capability in place. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you get, sort of that second track of dual track transformation going along with that, right? So you get that rapid cycle innovation going with the group of people that are the ones that are finding the problems that IT would never be able to get to,
Yeah.
So
yeah, great. I'm going to ask you another question about low code platforms that I know comes up a lot when we're talking to clients, which is trying to understand where do they fit and where do they not fit? I have one client that I'm working with right now, for example, they want to use Salesforce for everything. In their mind, Salesforce could be their email platform. It would be their email platform. And it's like, okay, I love Salesforce. I think it's a great platform, but yeah, it's not for everything,
Right.
So help us understand, because I feel like this is something that's been changing and evolving over time. Maybe if you rewind a few years, these low-code platforms were really for fairly templated type things where you weren't necessarily looking for a lot of UI flexibility and control. And, there was sort of a mold of what they were good for. And then beyond that, you probably wanted custom development. And I feel like that's grown and shifted and they're more flexible. But I love your perspective so that the folks that are listening kind of get a sense of how do they know what they're capable of. And frankly, where they're not so applicable, but if that's shifting, if they're capable of more than they used to be, giving everyone the updated perspective on the state of the art would be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, low-code platforms, look, if you're a small company, you could build out every system that you have in it, from templates, you know what I mean? Like Salesforce may not be for you. You could build it out in a low-code platform if you wanted to. As you get to bigger systems, when you look at a Salesforce or some of the other ERPs and things like that, as you move to the cloud, you're not going to customize those systems in the way that we used to from an IT perspective, right? So you're going to be following the standardized process that is designed into the system, because anything else will be very difficult to manage and maintain. So using a low-code platform to do some of the specialized processes that work for your company that maybe were not imagined into the standard systems that are out there today, it's great for that. You plug it in, it can share data with those systems, and then you can do what you need to do for your processes for your business. And it fits there very nicely. I think maybe in the past they weren't as good around some of that process work, but that's what's being built into them now. So I think that's another area of development and improvement in the platform that happens over time. And then of course it works great, obviously, for those standalone type systems where maybe you don't want to go buy a point solution for everything you're doing, right? Something that's maybe not completely mission critical, or, that you want to manage your data, and so you don't need all the bells and whistles of a third-party SaaS system. You can make it work for what you need it to work for. That's another, great use of a low-code, no-code platform. And really it's at this point, it's almost limited only by your imagination in terms of what you build out. But, if you were to go buy a point solution for everything you wanted to do, you end up with hundreds of them and it costs a lot of money. So it's, again, there's varying degrees of how much do you need all of that versus how you just need the basic functionality so somebody can build it out.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, before we run out of time, I want to return back to the topic of COVID. And I'm curious, we mentioned a couple of specific use cases. One was rapid redeployment of resources, and another was attestations for making sure people are, declare themselves COVID free. What are some of the other main things you've seen that people had to build quickly to respond to COVID within your clients?
I think that there were some applications built around testing, just like making sure that people were getting tested and that the tests themselves were being managed. This was such a disruption to the supply chain that there were applications built around aspects of the supply chain that maybe weren't as well covered before. But you need all, like, every step of the way measured and managed right now, because we saw what the disruption was to the supply chain. So there were some apps built in that realm as well. Those were some of the, COVID related things that people built. And then again, there were other applications that were built out that were, there were things that were being done that just couldn't be done the way they were before. Whenever, it's not the same when everybody's not in an office. So they were able to build out applications in QuickBase to be able to manage those processes as well. Yeah,
cool. Yeah, I can imagine. So if someone's interested in learning more about low-code platforms, how would you give them is there an overview you can give them of kind of the landscape? Like, obviously, QuickBase is a strong player. How would one go about choosing and selecting? And are there kind of like, well, there's sort of this part of the industry that kind of focus on this or that, or how would you help orient someone who's trying to figure out? Obviously, we hope they choose your product.
Exactly.
You were advising a friend, and they were like, "Well, how do I really know who I should be looking?" Let's assume someone wanted to, look at a few options. How would you advise them to evaluate as they're looking between different low-code platforms? What should they be looking at?
You want to make sure. You want to evaluate based on security. How easy is it to stand the platform up? How is it managed and maintained? I think those are some key areas. How easy or difficult is it for your user base to go in and use the platform itself? How well does it connect to the systems that you have? I think those are some key areas to really take a look at when you're looking at low code, no code platforms. Is it truly a platform? Is it something that you can stand up and have visibility to everything that's going on within the system? I think that's an important piece as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Was there anything in the COVID research that you did that we didn't get to? Any other insights that came out?
I don't think so. I think that's, again, I don't think we're ever going back to the same operating model we had before, and I think we had, and that's some of what we found, and some of the companies that are doing really well right now, what we were considering the leaders in our research, they very much took on that dual track transformation mode of operating, and that's not slowing down, and I think some of the other, we found the leaders and the followers, and I think the followers are, working to catch up. They're trying to figure out what things they need to be doing now, again, to be ready for the next time and to speed things along now, to keep their business running.
Yeah. Well, I see Caitlin has put up this slide here. Is there anything from this you wanted to, we've touched on some of these, but anything here you want to kind of wrap up with? Any other final thoughts about specific actionable recommendations for people that are listening?
No, one of the other things, like we talked very much about the technology, and one of the things that we did find in some of our research, it's not just about the technology. You really need to build that business IT relationship and work on those organizational culture issues, because not every company is ready to be giving, the capability to their business users to do some of their own development. That's something that companies should really look at. I think if the executives back that and show that the company is willing to build that culture of change and transformation, you'll get the groundswell as well. So you get working at it from both top down and bottom up is another thing that we found. So.
Great. And, one last thing I want to ask you, I know we're almost at time, but you mentioned how you don't think things are going back the way they were. I'd love your personal prediction on, because I totally agree with that. I don't think we're going to rewind the clock. And on the other hand, I assume that when COVID settles down, let's call it, because it probably will never end, but when it goes into the background of our lives, that some things will, if not go back, won't stay the way they are now either. That we're ready for a second transformation. We went from pre-COVID to COVID, and now we're going from COVID to post-COVID, or whatever you want to call it. Any predictions about what that's going to look like? Are there some things that will go back, or how will we move forward, and what changes, if you look in your crystal ball, do you see in the future?
I don't think we'll all be in an office 5 days a week ever again. I think that's one of the things that most people are saying. I think everybody sort of proved that they can work from home. I don't think that necessarily everybody's going to continue to work from home. That's sort of that other side of the question that you asked. I think that I think that going into an office will be a little bit more purpose driven than maybe it was before. Maybe you go in to see certain people on certain days, and that becomes the new normal, and there's a bit more flexibility in how you work between an office and your home. I think going forward, I think that's one thing that's definitely reimagined, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a little bit like, remember how we all used to wear, suits and stuff, and that type of stuff at the office, and then we started with Casual Friday, and then it wasn't long before Casual Friday became, screw it. Most offices don't.
That's right.
Sorry, my computer's making all kinds of noises. So, I think you're right. I've heard many people say I'm never going back to the way it was before. So I think that'll be an interesting balance, and more things that IT will need to. Jeez. All right. I installed this new app, and it doesn't obey my not, what do they call it? Do not disturb.
Do not disturb.
Anyway, well, thank you, Deb, so much for being here. This has been really, really interesting. And I think a lot of companies are already dabbling with low-code platforms. But I think what this COVID thing has shown us is that if it's not something that's part of your toolkit, which doesn't just mean software, it means your teams know how to use it and you have
exactly.
modified development process around it, that's meant for rapid applications, because you can have a great accelerated tool. If you take 6 months to do the requirements, you're kind of not getting the benefit,
Exactly.
So you have to have that in place, and that if you don't have it now, that it's really past time to be looking at it. And there's some great products, and obviously QuickBase is one of them. So thank you so much for being here, Deb. Really appreciate it. And if anyone has questions, and puts them in the chat, hopefully you might have a chance to take a look on LinkedIn and see if anyone has questions and respond to that dialogue as well. All right. Well, thanks so much for being here. Thank you all for listening and watching. And we'll see you all on Monday at 1 p.m. for the next episode in our livecast series. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Howard.